He abolishes all other political parties.
You have a totally alternative system of a single-party state, charismatic leader, an alternative legal system.
And then finally, he abolishes elections themselves.
This is a revolutionary rebirth. And what that means is you destroy the democratic system.
It's 1925, and Mussolini has done away with all democratic mechanisms that could be used to challenge him, and he completes the last step on the fascist path to absolute power. As the absolute ruler, he rallies the people with slogans like believe, obey, fight. We know what fight means. He's been doing that since he started his combat league. But these other ingredients, believe and obey, are really important too. Mussolini demands belief and submission, not just to him, but to his story. The story that he says will, quote, make Italy great, respected, and feared, restoring it to the glory of an imagined past, the Roman Empire.
What you're pointing towards is not actual history. What you're always pointing to is some kind of beautiful plastic moment.
Sarà il secolo della potenza italiana. Sarà il secolo durante il quale l'Italia tornerà per la terza volta ad essere direttrice della civiltà umana.
And Mussolini would be the singular voice for the entire nation. And as ever, his story glorifies soldiers and the, quote, bloody sacrifice of war, and reimagines the country as a giant military, a uniform bundle of sticks, which many Italians will become willingly. And for those who don't, their descent will be violently snuffed out. Everyone must get in line. For life is conquest, warfare, at first directed at home against his enemies, socialists, communists, liberal Democrats. But that war must eventually be brought abroad. He starts conquering parts of Africa, imposing his, quote, new civilization on others. Okay, so we have our first answer on what fascism is. It is a movement started by Benito Mussolini in 1919, one that glorifies violence, specifically violence against communism and socialism. It finds democracy itself as weak and contemptible, in need of not just reform, but total destruction and revolution. And it tells a story of a superior nation that has been humiliated and that needs to be restored. A mythologized past, whose decline they blame on their enemies, and whose rebirth they promise under the rule of one charismatic, strong leader. And crucially, they gain support from mainstream elites, rich people, politicians, that allows them to gain control of the country, after which they dismantle the democracy from within, and then demand total submission to the state, which allows them to mobilize huge numbers of people with a ton of propaganda, and then begin a program of conquest and expansion. Today we call that thing fascism. And we call it fascism not because it has some like Latin root in some like philosophy or worldview, but because Benito Mussolini chose the fascio, the bundle of sticks with an axe on it, as his logo when he was making his combat club in 1919 in Milan. If somebody else had done this first, we would probably call it something different today. And in fact, these ingredients that we just talked about weren't just happening in Italy. They were happening in a lot of places in Europe after World War I, especially in the countries that lost. Which brings us to another angry World War I vet, this one in Germany. Someone who was watching Mussolini very closely, admiring his rise to power, and who will one day take Mussolini's strategy to a whole new level.